Well, good morning. My name is Kelly Goslinga, and I'm an attorney at Claybaugh and Goslinga in Sioux Center, Iowa. My husband's Josh Goslinga, and we have 3 children. Jonathan is 8, Elin is 6, and then Elsie is a year and a half. So you may be asking yourself this morning how a divorce lawyer is going to enlighten you on walking in the faith at the workplace. And for the record, Tom Hydeen thought it'd be a good idea, so you can just blame him. But I'll tell you a little bit about how I grew up and where I came from, and then try to talk to you a little bit about how I try to implement faith in what I do. So I grew up on a farm kind of between Brookings and Madison, South Dakota. And went to a small school there called the town is Rutland. I think the population then was like 20 people. And then I transitioned to Brookings High School and graduated from there. But I grew up in the Lutheran church, and I think my upbringing and teaching was pretty similar to what we have here at First Reformed. And but as early as I can remember, I talked to God. And I don't really have a moment that I can remember as a child where I became a Christian or was born again. But I always just knew that I had accepted God into my heart and I had a relationship with him. And I think that comes from my mother's teaching. She is kind of like a walking Bible, is what we called her. She was primarily a stay-at-home mom. For a period of time, she owned a Christian bookstore in Brookings, and then she also obtained her lay ministry degree. But mostly it raised us and helped my dad on the farm. And my dad is a farmer. And always has been. And I think that I got my joy and drive to work from him. He always enjoyed his work and rarely complained about it. And I think the other person that primarily influenced me as a child was my maternal grandmother. We just had a really strong bond. And she kind of, I don't know if she taught me, but I think I got a strength from her. She taught me to escape in a good book. And she showed me that even introverts, even herself, who was somewhat reclusive, that they can change someone's life just by picking up the phone. She also taught me that you can't control others, but you can control yourself and how you react. So when I was 12, I told my dad I wanted to be a lawyer. And I have no idea why. But I feel like God just put that on my heart, and then it never left. And after that, I just kind of tried to work toward my goal. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I transitioned to Brookings, graduated from there, and then I went to SDSU for 2 years, and USF for 2 years. And then my senior year at USF, I met Josh. And if you guys know Josh, you know that I married up. There's just nothing to dislike there. And he is a strong man of faith, and that plays a huge role in my life every day. So we both graduated from USF in 2007, and then I went on to law school at USD in Vermilion, and then in 2009 we got married, and then I graduated from there in 2010. So I was in law school for 3 years, and then 2 years after, I worked alongside 2 defense attorneys in downtown Sioux Falls. They mostly handled criminal matters, some family law matters as well. But the individual that I worked with the most assisted in mostly criminal representation. So we represented an individual charged with murder. We represented a lot of sex offenders, rapists, people charged with child porn, and drug charges. When I started taking on cases myself, I did a lot of mental health involuntary committals and substance abuse involuntary committals. And that experience tested my faith more than anything I ever had before. I found myself just heartbroken for the individuals that we were working for. And as time went on, I started finding that I loved these people. I loved the sex offenders and the people who were charged with murder, and knew that if I loved them, that God loved them more. But I still struggled with why God would allow these individuals to suffer so much and why their victims would suffer so much. And it was through this struggle that I turned to God and asked, is there anything that I can do here? Why am I here? And then that's when I started seeing my calling more, and it just confirmed that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So after 2 years in Sioux Falls, Josh, my husband, had an opportunity to return to Orange City and work at Edward Jones. And then an acreage opened up near his parents. And so he wanted to start farming with his dad. So we believed that moving to this area would be really good for our family. And I was pregnant with Jonathan, our oldest, at that time. So I retook the bar exam. So I was only licensed in South Dakota. And then we moved here 1 month before Jonathan was born. And I found work at a small firm in Sioux Center. And then I still continued some criminal representation, but expanded more in the family law and juvenile areas. So today, my business partner, Missy Kleiba, and I continue to operate our practice in Sioux Center. And we practice primarily in the area of family law. We handle a lot of divorce, a lot of custody, guardianships. We do a lot of juvenile law where we represent kids who get in trouble with the law, and then parents or children who are involved with DHS. And then we also represent a lot of child victims of abuse, whether it's sexual or physical. And then I still practice some criminal law, mostly domestic abuse, some like OWIs and things of that nature. But I remember early in my practice, one man, upon hearing what I did for a living, said, "So you break up families?" And I suppose I can see why some people may see my work that way. And I have to be honest, when my kids first started asking me what I did, it's hard to explain what a divorce attorney does every day. So I'll try to break down a little bit of what my day consists of. My days often consist of the following: sitting alongside a mother when she unselfishly and voluntarily agreed to terminate her parental rights in order to give her children a better life. Crying with a father who was served with divorce papers and has gone a month without seeing his children. Working with child abuse victims and putting together victim impact statements to outline the ways in which they've been impacted by their abuse. Standing with a drug addict who can't stop using meth and has lost everything, including his children. Guiding a wife and mother who stepped out on her husband and now has to sleep in the bed she made. Conducting home visits and trying to determine whether it's safe for children to remain in the household. Interviewing children at school so their abusive parent can't answer questions for them. Looking for solutions for a child who's hurting inside, repeatedly acts out in violence, and gets arrested, and despite being at juvenile detention for 3 months, hasn't had a parent, you're fine, hasn't had a parent call or visit them. Explaining to a mother that even though she didn't want a divorce, she will now only be able to see her children every other week. Individuals don't walk into my office because everything's going great. They walk into my office because their world is falling apart. And God meets the broken. Psalm 34:18 tells us that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and I see that every day. And each day on my way to work, I pray that when these individuals choose me to walk with them on their journey, that I can shine a light of God's grace and love, and I don't take that lightly. We're so blessed to live in this community. There's so many loving and safe foster families and respite families for children who need them. There's families who sacrifice materials to adopt and care for our orphans. And there's neighbors who will show up for a husband when his wife walks out, or neighbors who show up for a wife when her husband goes to prison. And I'm so thankful for that. But one thing that I've learned in my legal experience is that so many times no one shows up for the wife who walked out. And no one shows up for the husband who goes to prison. We judge, we hear rumors, and make up our own mind about what happened, but we overlook the fact that we don't know the whole story. Or even if we do, we feel like that person doesn't love or deserve our love and attention. We overlook the fact that it is sinners who need God the most and are the most broken. Recently, I've been rereading the New Testament, and I'm reminded of how Jesus seeks out sinners. And in Mark 2:17, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have come to call the righteous, not to call the righteous, but to call sinners." And I think of the time when Jesus sought out the woman with 5 husbands, and he sought out the tax collectors. But one of my favorite stories is the lesson of the adulterous woman. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought her to Jesus and said, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act." And they refer to Moses' law and say that, under Moses' law, we should stone her. But what do you say? And Jesus, knowing that they're trying to trap him, begins writing with a stick on the ground and asks the Pharisees and the scribes questions. And he says, "He who is out without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first." And that's when they kind of start leaving. And no one throws a stone because they know that none of them is without sin, and eventually they all walk away. And that's when Jesus tells her that he doesn't condemn her, but then he tells her to sin no more, and they go on their way. So I try to ask myself, and I urge you to do the same, are we like the scribes and the Pharisees, wanting to punish and throw stones? Or are we following in the footsteps of Jesus, acknowledging that we are all sinners and that we all need Jesus? Pastor Tim has encouraged us to have a life verse, and my life verse is Colossians 3:23. "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord and not for human masters." So whether it's walking a parent through a heartbreaking divorce or sitting with a child who's been sexually abused and facing her abuser, I pray that God uses me to work for the Lord in everything I do. And I think that as I get older and I grow in my faith, I've come to realize that life isn't supposed to be easy. This has been a hard pill for me to swallow. So I always thought that if I'd go to high school and go to college and go to law school, and if I could become a lawyer and have kids and have a nice husband, that everything would just be easy. And it's not, and that's not the way God intended our life to be. And life is hard. But it's hard in different ways for different people. And even in the hard, if we look to God, we will see beauty and we will see good. So, sorry, I don't know how much time I'm supposed to take.
Any questions right now for Kelly before, I'm sure she has other things to share, but any questions? I guess for me, how would you, you're working with a child who was molested.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it would be hard to hold back the anger that I might have to the person who molested this child. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with that?
So I think that my criminal law experience has helped me in that way because I've sat next to the person who's done that before. I remember one of my first courtroom experiences, I had to go do just an initial appearance, just a small proceeding where we get a new court date. And Manny, the attorney that I worked with, was like, "Here, take this file, you gotta go to the courthouse quick and just get a new court date." So I go sit down to his client, next to his client, and it looks just like any of us, and I figure it's just an OWI or something like that. And I sit down next to him and I'm like, "What are we here for?" He's like, "Oh, I was charged with child porn," And I think just sitting with those people and more hearing their story, they're humans just like the rest of us. They're sinners just like the rest of us. Their sin is different. It hurts someone in a different way. But I think that my representing them has helped me see that. And I don't justify or condone their actions, and I'll never do that in my representation of anyone. But they need love and they need God's grace even more than, maybe someone else. And so it's hard not to be angry though sometimes, especially the kids just break my heart. It's my favorite part of my practice, but it's also the part that is the most heartbreaking. But
this sounds like kind of a dumb question, but if you have a liar,
yeah,
and it's a liar,
mm-hmm.
and you as a Christian defends the liar,
yeah.
How do you handle that?
So I can't let them lie under oath because that's unethical. So if I ever knew that a client lied under oath, I'd have to withdraw, and the case would have to stop as far as my involvement. And so far that's never happened. I always advise my clients that they have to be truthful. But like in the case of the murder where I worked on, I didn't know if he was justified in what had happened. And so there was a fight and someone ended up dead. And I didn't know if my client was guilty or not. And so then really what you're doing is you're just putting up advocating for their position, telling their story, and letting the judge or the jury decide. And so most of the time, clients come to you and say, yeah, I did it. And then it's, okay, how can I help you? Do you need treatment? Do you need to see a counselor? How can I work with the county attorney to make sure we can show the county attorney that this is an isolated incident or this isn't going to happen again, you know? And I've never encouraged lying, and to do so would be completely unethical. But I have tried many cases where I didn't know exactly what happened. And your job is to present the client's story, and then it's up to the judge or the jury to decide. So, yeah.
I was kind of struck by how much it seems like you need like social worker, psychologist
Yes.
skills and all of that. I just didn't realize that much. Of course, you're leaning on your faith a lot.
Every day,
Yeah.
every day we make referrals to pastors, counselors. Yep.
Yeah. But you're the go-between to get
Yes.
to that.
Yep. Treatment. We deal with a lot of treatment facilities. Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had clients say to you, why do you have so much faith in me? That you want to, that I've sinned and I've done bad and stuff, but why do you want to even associate with me?
I think many of them feel that way, yes.
So is that where you share your faith with them then?
I mean,
Or not necessarily.
I try. You never know where people are at in that. So a lot of times I'll tell them, like, I'm praying for you, or with parents who are, on the brink of losing their children, I'll tell them, like, I know that you can do this, but you have to make up your mind. And I've prayed with them before, but yeah, I don't often sit and like tell them my story or anything.
Sure,
And,
sure.
that would be hard anyway because I haven't been through what they've been
Sure.
through.
Sure.
But
I think in your position, it would be hard not to be judgmental, whereas I sit on the outside and look at something and it's easy for me to judge at home to say they're wrong.
it's
and I can-
easier though when you're not meeting with that person and you don't hear the heartbreak.
Yeah.
We only see the outward of what
Sure.
happened, or she left her husband or whatever. But when you actually meet with that person and you hear their struggle, it's different. And I think it's easy to love them in that situation and to see the brokenness.
But if you're, I know this, I'm asking some stupid questions, but, if you meet with someone and they're always not guilty, and then you prepare all that way, and then way at the end, then they say, I've been lying,
Oh yeah, people lie to me all the time. Yeah.
okay, so then you have to start all over, or?
So then, oftentimes they'll say, "Oh no, that didn't happen," and so then you advocate for them that that's their position, that that didn't happen or whatever. And if at some point it becomes clear that it did and we change course, right? Then I might go back to the county attorney and say, "Hey, let's get a deal here. Like they're going to enter an admission, or whatever it is, or our case has changed a little bit, and here's the information." But I mean, when I meet with people, I always tell them, like, you need to tell me the truth because I can't help you if you're dishonest with me. And if something comes up later, I can't help you and advocate for you. It's always better to just be honest and truthful. But yeah, I mean, that doesn't happen in most cases. And
So you usually don't hear it from that person, it just, the circumstances, it usually comes out.
later. Yeah. But that's their decision, I advise them and I'll be there and walk with them. But if they choose to lie, then they're going to deal with the consequences. So, I mean, yeah.
And it's not perjury to lie to you, but it's perjury to lie when they're on the stand.
Mm-hmm.
So they justify that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, some people, everyone's sin is different, but some people are so ashamed and so caught in their lies that it just keeps going and going and going, but I try not to take that personally. You know, I'm there to do my job, and if and when they lie to me, you know, it's not good for their case. But
Has your faith ever made you step away from a case?
It's not a dumb question.
I
It's a
know.
good question.
I don't think about that. I would say the only one, the one that's bothered me the most, and I don't know why, but I was helping review like surrogacy contracts, and that one, that I stopped doing that. I just didn't like some of the terms that were being agreed to, like termination type of terms. And really, that convicted me the most. Like, that was what kept me up at night. And I knew that it was just my job to review the contract, but that one still bothered me the most. That's the only time. Oh, no, there was one other time. There was an individual charged with child porn, and I didn't want to have to view the evidence. And so I had Manny, the individual who I was working with, he agreed to handle it for me. So those are probably the only 2 times.
I'm really gonna make you sweat with this question.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. So as you've been part of our congregation, has there ever come a time where you thought something we're doing in ministry is a bad idea because it could lead to something in society, or we really should be doing better? Or even when you're in your work, where was the church in all this? I mean, if you could, I'll rephrase the question this way. If you could make one change to how we do ministry at First Reformed Church, that would be for the social good that you see is necessary, what do you think it would be?
It's always like easier said than done, right? I mean, sometimes I wish like we'd spend less money on things and more money on people, or like outreach, or like community meals or things like that. It's not like I'm going out there and doing it either, so it's kind of hypocritical of me to even say that. But I've oftentimes thought that. I mean, I think for a lot of the individuals that I work with, it would be intimidating to walk in here where we're all dressed up nice and everything looks real nice, and it's like this nice package on, you know, and I mean, we're broken individuals too, and we're all sinners. But I think that it would be intimidating for many of them to walk in here, and I don't know how you change that.
Well, sometimes I think if we all took the baptism this morning more serious, that we are going to help that child in the good times and bad.
Yeah.
And I don't feel any church, all 900 people, really take that child as their child.
Yeah. I think the things that I see the most in the community is like, well, she left her husband, so they all show up for him, but which is fantastic, and I'm so glad for that. But she might need it also. She cheated on her husband, and so she's probably struggling as well. And what are we doing to wrap our arms around her? Not to condone or her behavior, but to say, we see that you're hurting, and we're still here, even though you've made a poor decision.
You see the impact of what's going on, divorces and so forth. And it's been replicated, it sounds like, numerous times.
Yeah.
So how do you share the wisdom from those experiences that you've gone through with those that are going through it to maybe bring healing, or to say, because in any divorce, there's his story, there's her story,
I know.
somewhere in between there's the truth.
Yeah.
So how do you work on that, just making sure that legally you've got it done, but you've done it enough for the clients that fosters and promotes healing long-term that's better for the whole family, the children and everything as well? How do you bring wisdom to that process?
So anytime that a client comes in and meets with me, I always try to see if reconciliation is possible, and I always encourage that if it's safe. I always ask if they've met with a pastor, if they've met with a counselor, and most people have. I mean, most of the time, by the time they've come to me, they are mentally done. They've tried all of that, and now their mind's pretty made up. And so I try to push that I mean, maybe not push it, but kind of open them up to the options. I also try to explain and give a good picture of reality, like what that's gonna look like, what time they're gonna have with their kids now, what holidays are gonna look like, so they know that in making this decision, this is going to be the consequences of it. And then as we go through it, I pray for them. I tell them I'm praying for them, if I feel like that's appropriate. And I review text messages a lot and communications between the parties. And I always counsel them on how to treat the other parent, no matter what's going on. You still have to be kind. No matter how they treat you, you still have to be kind. No matter what's going on, in front of the children, you should be putting the children first. So that's a lot of my job, is trying to keep the children out of it and trying to encourage kindness. But
So you must be emotionally drained when you come home.
sometimes I am.
How do you restore yourself to have anything left for your family?
So I try to separate it, like when I'm done at work, I go home and I'm, mom. But a lot of times at night I watch Friends.
You don't have to think.
Yes, and it just The Office, because when you see yuck all day long, it can, especially with the kids, it's hard, but it's good to have healthy supports around you, and
Bill, have you ever watched Friends?
I have.
Okay. Any other questions before we close?
Have you seen a lot of increase in yuck during this COVID?
Yes, it's awful. It's heartbreaking.
And so what do you attribute that to?
People being stuck at home with people they probably already didn't get along with well, and more alcohol and drug abuse. It's not been good for people who are already struggling with mental health. There's financial issues going on, and when in March, when this first happened, the Department of Human Services, they weren't doing home visits even on active cases. So I was showing up at kids' doors because for the first time, there's no one with us. The teachers are our best witnesses because they see them every day, and no one was there. So I'm showing up knocking doors, it made me so mad. And so, I think it's been really, we're just getting back into the courtroom, but I don't know. It's been really, really heartbreaking.
There's a lot of tertiary problems on the COVID, not just the deaths and the sickness, but exponentially way more of that we don't see.
So much more. I know. I'm so glad that the kids are back in school, because those teachers they know every kid that is struggling. And we have so many good teachers in our community. So hopefully that stays.
Well, Kelly, we thank God for the heart He has given you.
Thank you.
And I'm drained after a day of teaching. And just to know that you dig deeper and still care and love those that that are put in your hands. So let's have a word of prayer as we close. Father God, we thank you for Kelly's story. Thank you for her testimony to these individuals, both the offended and the offenders, that she has a heart to bring you to them, and that she is willing to share the gospel in any way she can, and to pray for people. And Lord, I just pray that each one of us here that have heard her story, that we can pray for these individuals also, that we will add people to our list that are going through the court system. And Father, like Peg prayed today, that we seek your power in ending this pandemic, and we seek your power in ending this yuck that is taking place in our society. We pray this in your holy name. Amen. Thank you so much.